Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Pod Up Show with Shane Matthews in the morning. My name is Jackie Spreads, and I'm your host for the day. Very exciting show today, everybody. I don't know if you saw on our Facebook live stream and our Facebook wall post this week, but we have a very special guest, Coach Billy Donovan of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Obviously, Coach Donovan was a coach at Florida for 16 years before that. Had a lot of success at Florida and a lot of success out in Oklahoma as well, which is still going. And we saw as recently as March 11th when we had that very obscure situation in Utah that Coach Donovan was in the center of. So it's a lot of fun. We're going to get to talk about that. A lot of questions for Coach Donovan. If you got any questions, don't hesitate to give us a text on the Titan MRI text line or the Pound Hurt text line or our Facebook Live. It is all up to you guys. I have a lot of questions myself. I don't get to talk to Coach Donovan as much as I'd like to, being related to him, but we very much appreciate him coming on this show, and obviously these certain circumstances are allowing us to do this. So we thank him a lot, and we wish him the best going forward. We wish everybody in this situation the best going forward, and to stay safe. But here we are, everybody. It's a good morning. It's a rainy Monday morning, but there can't be a better guest to get. Coach Donovan is a legend of the game, a student of the game, and a master of the game. Has been around since the early 80s when he took Providence to the Final Four in 1987. Been going to Final Four since 1987. Had a little bit of a 13-year hiatus there. Went back in 2000 with the Gators, and then 3 more times after that with Florida. Has coached in the playoffs every single year he's been in the NBA. There really is just nobody with a greater experience. He's in the top 99.9% of people to talk to basketball about. So we're very happy about that. We're very lucky. We're looking forward to the show very much, and I hope you guys are too. First, we got to thank our sponsors, though, for making this possible. We're going to run some ads here real quick before we get to Coach Donovan. About 5 minutes of ads, and then we'll launch into the interview. So let's get ready. Let's go.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills.
Let's give them something to cheer for now.
Not bad,
Gridiron
Jackie
sponsors
really,
are
really
Crime
good.
Prevention Security,
hey, listen,
small enough to serve you, large enough to care.
Today.
Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Peachland Dentistry, Gator Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte and surrounding areas. Area Rug Masters, your #1 choice for rug cleaning. And Pound Hurt, preferred personal injury attorneys.
Our touchdown sponsors are Gator BTW, Campus USA Credit Union, Celebration Point Town Center, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, The Keys Grill and Piano Bar, UF Mover Guys, The Digital Mortgage Guy, Adams Ribs, Cloud9 Spa, Coldstone Creamery, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Center State Bank.
If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, podupwithshane.com, and click on the Advertise button or call Freddie Wiebe at 352-284-3733.
Again, thank you for all the great businesses that support the show. Please remember, if you like what we are doing here, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
He's looking, still looking. He's going for the end zone. He's got a touchdown!
I'm your host for the day, Jackie Spreads, and joining me now is very special guest, coach of the OKC Thunder, Billy Donovan. Coach, how's it going?
I'm doing great, Jackie Spreads. I like the nickname.
Hey, I appreciate it. It took a lot of time and effort. I got a pretty creative family members, a group of them. So pretty lucky there. Coach, I want to start with just a month ago here, March 11th. You're in Utah. And, you're about to tip the game off, and I think there were some murmurs beforehand. Obviously, there was talk of this season being shut down or at least played with no fans because of the virus going around right now. Just take us through kind of what happened that night of March 11th in Utah, the last night of the NBA season before that game tipped off.
Yeah, it was kind of a really a crazy night because certainly, the coronavirus was out there publicly. And, a lot of players had not been tested for it. And I think people were a little bit really taking precaution during NBA games from a health sanitizing standpoint with the basketball, things like that. But we basically went through the starting lineups, and we were getting ready to walk out for the opening tip. And I saw our medical head medical trainer go out on the court and was talking to the officials. And I thought it was a little bit strange, but I just thought maybe he was talking to the officials about maybe during timeouts wiping off the ball, different things that they could do to keep themselves safe.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, our assistant general manager came out there, and they kind of huddled up, and then they brought Quinn Snyder and I to half court. And Quinn basically had said that that Gobert was not feeling well, and that he was in the process of being tested, and they were waiting for a result. And they said that we probably need to just postpone the game. It wasn't canceled, but they just said, let's hold off and see what happens. So they sent both teams back to the locker room. And then obviously, about 20 minutes later, they came into our locker room and said that he had tested positive, for the virus, and they canceled the game. And then I think maybe the last game that was in play that night was Dallas Mavericks were playing.
Yes.
That ultimately ended up being the last day of the NBA season. And then obviously everything got shut down. And, since that day, we've been kind of waiting just to see how things progress with the virus.
Right. And obviously we're still waiting. I've been saying to people who are asking me when the season's going to come back, like I have any info, I just say, the coronavirus is synonymous with unpredictability. And we just need to kind of stay on our toes here. In that situation, I was watching that Dallas and Denver game, and I was paying attention to what was going on in the season because I love watching Utah and OKC play. You guys have like an unspoken rivalry with all those first round playoff matchups over the last few years. So I was planning on watching that game or at least the second half of it. And then I realized that game was canceled and I only had Denver on. So I'm sitting there not even able to grasp that this is the last NBA game I'm going to watch, even though it's probably the most balanced season, probably the most open season for a title run from a non-contender, but from a non-perennial contender we've seen in quite some time. So it is really a shame that the season got canceled. But I mean, here we are having a great time trying to talk about this, talk these things through. And the best thing to do with the coronavirus right now, and as a sports fan and a sports junkie, which I'm sure most of you are, is kind of visit a revisionist history. And that's perfect for Coach Donovan because he's had such a great career and tenure here with the Florida Gators and with the OKC Thunder. I want to start and go back a little bit to the 2000 team that you took to the Final Four as a 5 seed. Did you have any idea going into that year that this team had the ability to do something special?
Well, that year was a really challenging year because we were an extremely deep team and we were young. We were playing 10 guys. We almost had a complete second unit. Brett Nelson came off the bench with Donnell Harvey and Matt Bonner. We were really, really, really deep. And, I think when you have a lot of talented players, there's always a level of sacrifice that goes into that. And, trying to manage the playing time and as competitive as that group was. So I never felt like during the course of the year, we were ever really playing to our potential. I think we were trying to figure it out. We had obviously some great moments during the course of the year. But I think probably being a 5-speed spoke to, maybe some of the, challenges we had with the number of players and really good quality players we had. I think the thing that brought that team really, really close together, because they were really, really competitive, was the Butler game in the first round of the tournament. And Mike Miller makes that shot, and we go on to the second round to play Illinois. And after the game was over with, Brent Wright got up in front of the team in the locker room and said, we need to put whatever it is we individually want, and we need to make it all about winning and each other, because this almost was taken away from us. And I think when he did that in front of the group, it really brought us really, really close together. Not to say that those guys were not close, but they all had aspirations of being pros. And, when you're young like that, you go through a growing stage, of understanding how to work inside of a team.
Right.
And then I think once that game happened against, Butler, we really kind of ran through the rest of the tournament pretty well. And then obviously went up against the Michigan State team that was in the Final Four the year before, was probably more seasoned, more experienced than we were. We didn't play great. They played very well. But I think it was a testament to what those guys did and how they came together at the most crucial point in time in the season.
Right, and that's not the first time that has happened, or I guess that was the first time, but it's not the only time it's happened. We see that you've taken 7 seeds to the Elite Eight and 8 seeds to the third round of the Sweet 16 before. Talk about how preparing for an NCAA tournament where you know that you're probably going to get an at-large bid, you're going to be in the 7, 10, 5 maybe range. Talk about kind of preparing for your opponent when you first get them and you're saying, oh, well, we're the 3 seed and we're playing a 10-seeded Vermont team or something like that. How is it different scouting a mid-major who has kind of just ran through their conference and hasn't seen anybody great all year?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, Jack, is I think you have to basically pin the tournament down to 4 teams, and that's really those 4 teams that you're going to play on either Thursday or Saturday or Friday and Sunday. You're in like a small tournament. Mm-hmm. The first game is very, very easy. And what I mean by that, it's not easy to play, but it's easy to prepare, because when Selection Sunday happens, the earliest you're going to play is on Thursday. The latest you're going to play is on Friday. And that's probably more time to prepare than you get during your conference play, because you're really playing twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. Right. So you've got a lot of time to prepare. So you really can get your team ready. But the part that you mentioned is a little bit challenging is, you have to block out and get the players to block out, whether it's, hey, you need to be on upset alert because this is a team that really nobody knows about. And, your guys don't maybe look at that as being a formidable opponent based on who they've played, right, in the SEC. Then the other part of it too, is the idea that, oh, they're just going to roll through this team. So I think the first game is always really hard to play. There's a lot of nerves. I think you're seeing a different personnel. We go through about 2.5 months of the SEC where there's a lot of familiarity, where you're seeing players over and over. You're seeing teams sometimes 2 or 3 times a year based on the SEC tournament. And then you shift into playing against a team that you know nothing about. And you got to educate them. And, what are the things that this team does well and how can they beat you? And then just getting those guys to understand that really seeding doesn't make a difference. Mm-hmm. I've always felt this way. In the NCAA tournament, everybody's earned the right to play. And because they've earned the right to play, they're good teams. So sometimes you'll see some of these mid-major teams where you look at their conference and it's really amazing what they've done. Some of these teams have won 20 straight games and they kind of completely fly under the radar, and they're really good. I go back to that Butler team, back in 2000, where maybe Butler did not have the same name recognition that it has today with what they've done. Mm-hmm. Or even a Gonzaga the year before when we lost to them to go to the Elite Eight. They were kind of a team that was kind of up and coming, but they certainly did not have the cachet that they have here today as a program. So really getting the guys to understand. And I would say our guys have been really, really good about respecting opponents and understanding who they're playing. And they know that on any given night you can get beat. But you also don't want to create a level of fear and concern that, that this team's going to beat you, they're going to beat you and make the guys nervous. Mm-hmm. They've got to have a healthy respect and a healthy level of confidence, and there's got to be a humility and a balance in those 2 areas.
Right. And confidence levels are a huge, huge thing in basketball, obviously. I mean, the phrase, and I've heard you say it to me a million times, it's because I don't pass, is good shooters have a short memory. And that reigns true, because if you look at games even Durant had under your tenure, specifically the game 6 of that 2016 series was he was 10 for 31 from the field. Yeah, but he took 31 shots still because he was your best player and you needed him to take 31 shots in that game. There was nothing else that could be done, and he just didn't have it that night, but the confidence never wavers. So I feel like in the best players in the world, which Durant is obviously one of them, it's extremely, this confidence level just never goes away. Is that the same kind of when you were coaching college? Say you had the best kid on your team was probably Mike Miller in that 2000 season and Noah in the 06 season. Is there a level of confidence that you see between guys who have had success all year and guys who are just kind of coming in or maybe hot and cold? I remember Michael Frazier had some confidence issues there for a while, even though he's probably one of the best shooters I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Jack. I think when you look at, I use Brad Beal as an example because, he came in as a freshman, highly touted, left after his freshman year. And when Brad made the decision to go to the NBA, I asked him this question. I said, Brad, okay, of the 30 plus games that you played this year as a freshman, how many games do you feel like you played up to your potential? And he said, maybe half. And I thought Brad was a guy whose confidence didn't waver. I think the biggest thing for guys is when they're coming from high school to college, it's so different in so many different aspects. They're away from home from the first time. Sometimes they're separated from their families. They're playing against different players at different level of talent. They're learning the college game. Everything's completely different. So there's a learning curve that they go through. Guys, to me, the best ones are the guys that I would say there's some players I say they have surface confidence. And what I mean by that is anything that happens positive to them externally, they're confident. So if they're making shots or things are going well, their confidence is high. But the minute they hit a bump in the road or adversity and things are not going well, they start to doubt and they lack confidence. The best players to me, even when things are not going well, there's this internal belief and confidence in themselves that regardless of what's going on, they can work themselves through those things. I would say that's probably the biggest difference for me in college and in the NBA. And obviously you're dealing with guys in the NBA with a lot more experience. They're grown men and they've been through so much. But when guys like, to your point, of Kevin Durant or Russell Westbrook or Chris Paul or Paul George, when those guys are having a rough quarter or a rough half, they have an incredible ability to be able to bounce back. And sometimes for younger players, if it doesn't start well, it usually doesn't end well.
Right.
And that's the difference between these guys up here at this level. If it doesn't start well, those guys can turn it on pretty quickly and get themselves refocused because of their competitiveness and their confidence.
Right, and that's a perfect segue into something I wanted to talk to you about today was just the difference between not only the NBA and the college game, but just basketball in general in the last 10, 15 years here is I know you guys played Houston a few times this season, didn't get to finish it obviously, but they just made that trade where they got Robert Covington playing center. And they got, their tallest player is 6'6", and back in the day, I mean, I'm reading the book of basketball right now, and all the MVPs throughout the 90s who weren't Jordan were all big men. Before that was all Russell and guys like McHale and Bird, and now I feel like the modern center is out of the league. Is there anything that sticks out in the game today? Not only in confidence levels and kind of the style of play, but the difference, because I mentioned earlier to you before we got going here this morning that double-digit leads in the NBA seem to dissipate without even a notion. I mean, I've seen the Russell Westbrook only Thunder team that year he won the MVP erase a 20-point deficit to a playoff team before in about 5 minutes, and I've also seen it happen on the other end. So just talk about a little bit how the NBA game has changed, and why do you think that these teams are able to come back from such great leads so quickly?
Well, I think, Jack, if you go back and look over the last 25 or 30 years of the league, one of the things you'll see is a shift stylistically, where there's a lot more three-point shots taken. The game is really spread out. In some situations, you're dealing with potentially 5 players that shoot threes on the floor, probably a lot of times at least 4.
Right.
And what's happened now is analytics has become a huge part of the game. And I think players understanding analytics is just as important as the coaches understanding it. So it's really fascinating because, when you're so much of like a Patrick Ewing or an Olajuwon or a David Robinson, some of those guys back then that were just these dominant big men, Shaquille O'Neal, those guys could really power their way to the basket. But those shots from the block where, they're shooting jump hooks or turnaround jump shots, analytically, for most players, it's not a great shot. Now, there's exceptions to every rule. Like Tim Duncan is a great offensive player from anywhere on the floor. LaMarcus Aldridge obviously plays from that area of the floor, is really effective. People talk about these non-paint twos. Kevin Durant outperforms, anywhere on the floor when he shoots the ball. The same thing, we've got, Chris Paul this year, who really is an unbelievable mid-range jump shooter. But what's happened is for most of the league, guys are not going to make enough of those shots to beat teams because they can't shoot a high enough percentage. So what you're seeing, even with like the Milwaukee Bucks, who's got the best record, you've got both Lopez twins who play for the Milwaukee Bucks, who are both over 7 feet. And they'll post those guys up some when they have mismatches. But for the most part, they're behind the three-point line and they're taking threes. So what teams are fighting for right now are good open 3-point shots, layups, and getting to the free throw line. Part of the reason why you've talked a little bit about these leads dissipating so quickly is teams playing faster. And with a 24-second shot clock and teams playing faster and the number of points that are being scored, you're up by 12, 14 points with 5 minutes to go. You have 2 or 3 really poor possessions on offense. They come down and make a couple threes. Next thing you know, it's a 1 or 2 possession game. So I think the leads dissipate because of the speed and the pace the game's being played at and the number of 3-point shots that are going up. And the hardest threes in the NBA to take away are threes that are in transition. So when teams are playing off of missed shots and they're out in transition, that's where teams get a lot of 3-point shots. And really, because of the number of possessions, just in an average NBA game, there's going to be 100 possessions on offense and 100 possessions on defense. And with the number of possessions that are available and the talent level of these players, they can put up points really, really quickly. And it's hard. It's funny because I'll watch a college game or I'll see a college game and, the score's in the low 60s. If you're the best defensive team in the NBA, you probably need to wrap your head around that you're probably going to give up about 106 points a game. From a starting standpoint, you're going to give up 106. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to fight for the analytical spots on the floor to try to take away good, efficient shots, and you try to make teams take, inefficient shots. And like I said, there are certain players that doesn't matter where they shoot from, they're just that good. They can outperform the average league numbers.
I mean, you watched Klay Thompson make 11 out of 18 threes. And I'm sure you've watched Golden State erase 15 and 20-point deficits and 3-1 deficits in series because obviously they're the most firepowerful team that we've seen in the last few years here. They've kind of dominated the league. But I want to go back because I read a stat the other day is in the 2006-07 season, the Los Angeles Lakers, led by Kobe, that was the year he scored 81 and 60, so multiple times. They led the league in pace. If you were to put that pace in today's league, you know where they'd be? Dead last, and it's not even close. So the way the game has changed even in just the last 10 years, and I mean 10 years ago at this time, or I guess it's about 12 years ago now, you were in the Final Four and you were coaching Florida to championships. And so you've obviously been around the game and you've been coaching during this whole overhaul. How has it been affecting you in the last 5 years, especially since coming to the NBA, kind of this whole whirlwind of the analytical movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point what you're saying, Jack, because here's the thing, people don't understand. The first 6 or 7 seconds of the shot clock, that's your highest across the league averages. Teams shoot the highest percentage from the field the first 6 seconds in the clock. From that point on, the shooting percentages go all the way down. So the lowest shooting percentage is the last 6 seconds in the shot clock. That's where teams shoot the lowest percentage. So when everybody in the NBA's got that information, you know what's doing? It's forcing teams to play faster and try to generate shots earlier in the clock before the defense gets set. So, to your point about the Lakers being number 1 in the league in pace, the speed at which these teams are playing at right now, and it's not so much that that guys are just flying down the floor and jacking up shots. It's that with a 24-second shot clock, teams are getting into offense when there's 19, 20, 21 seconds on the clock. When you're into your offense that fast with the level of talent, you've given yourself more opportunities to score. And especially if you look at, probably more than half the game is going to be played off missed shots. That's where teams are really fast breaking is on missed shots. And that's where teams are looking to get 3-point shots.
Right, and the transition 3 has become a transcendent thing in the NBA today. We got a text here on the Titan MRI text line for you, a question for you, coaches. If the season were to begin again and the stoppage were to cease here, how would you get your players ready to or try to get them ready to get to the level in which they were playing before the season stopped? That your last game was a big win in Boston, a 104-105 thriller. And you guys, obviously 40 wins. You weren't supposed to be that great this year. 32 wins was the Vegas number, and you had 40 in mid-March. So how did you plan and how do you plan if the season comes back to get these guys ready to go for the playoffs?
Yeah, it's a great question, Spreads. I think it's something I think about every day. We're obviously all separated from our players. And I think the NBA has done a great job surveying the landscape of our country and the federal government of how we proceed as a league going forward. And I think Adam Silver's done a great job trying to handle all of this and look at all these situations. The hardest part, I think, for coaches and for players is we don't know what it's going to look like. I do believe everybody's optimistic that we can get back to playing at some point. But the hard part is, I think that do you go back in and play part of the regular season or all the regular season? Do you go right into the playoffs? How much time do they give the players to get ready? If for some reason this got pushed out all the way to June, that we couldn't do anything until June, that's a lot of time off for these players. I think the NBA would give these guys adequate enough time to try to get themselves back playing. A lot of people compare this to the lockout, and I wasn't in the NBA during the lockout, so I'm not saying that I know totally. But the difference between a lockout, in my opinion, is these guys had places to go play. Right now, they have nowhere to go work out. Everybody is kind of staying at home and practicing social distancing and trying to do the best job they can to, flatten the curve and make sure everybody's staying healthy. But they're not able to work out like they normally would. So I think that the NBA office is going to understand that whenever we get back to playing, there's going to need to be an adequate amount of time to build up to letting these guys play. And then once we do get to a point where we can play, what is that going to look like in terms of, do we play all regular season games? Do we play a handful of them? Because there's a lot of things out there right now. When you look at the playoff race in the West, there's a lot of teams there that, between, 7 and 12 teams have got a legitimate chance for the playoffs. So,
right.
We're all just trying to stay optimistic and try to stay ready. But I think, as Adam Silver said, last week, there's just more information we have to gather before they're able to make any kind of decision moving forward.
Right, and we don't want it. We don't want any kind of rash decision where I've seen rumors swirling the last month, just rumors swirling everywhere where, they're going to play it in Vegas and they're going to use the practice facilities and they're not going to have any fans and they're going to test everybody every day. And there's just, we have to wait. That's the only time we can is just wait it out. That being said, I think it would be silly for them to bring everybody back and kind of play a regular season. Obviously there's still some seeds up for grab there. I would say 10 to 15 games. You just have the teams who are still in contention. I don't think the Knicks need to be playing right now. I don't think that the Kings need to be playing right now. But got teams like you and teams like even New Orleans who still had a shot there, and obviously the two LA teams are still, this was their season. So I think that you have to do a little bit of a regular season, whether that's 5 games or 15 games. I'm not sure. Do you think that a regular season is possible, or do you think at all coming back before the next season is possible?
Yeah, I think, Jack, if you listen to what Adam Silver said, everything's on the table right now for the NBA. I think he's looking at a lot of different situations and a lot of different possibilities. And I think the biggest thing that he said, and I understand because it's the right thing, is they're going to put the health of the players and everybody else first, and then look at what the government's saying. But I think that all the things you're talking about are things that are being discussed and things that are being talked about. And I think they're weighing all their options of what the final part of this 2019-20 season can be.
Right, and again, I said this was, the season I personally was most excited for as a basketball fan, just because there was no Super Warriors going in. You had a lot of balance, and there was the first time I felt that a non-LeBron team in the East could actually go get a ring in that Bucks team. And obviously, you Nick Nurse and Mike Budenholzer were the top 3 for the Coach of the Year. So all 3 of you guys did a fantastic job there. Talk about a little bit in the Western Conference, the challenges that you've had to go up against, because maybe it's not as deep in the East. This year was the year that has been the deepest in the East in a very long time, in my opinion, where there's no clear kind of run through favorite. But in the West, it's been brutal every year. You took that 73 win or 72 win 73 win Warriors team to 7 games that year, or I should say they took you to 7 games. So it's just it's a grind in the West. I know that because I've been a Mavericks fan and I've been a Thunder fan for 5 years now. Talk about a little bit how grueling the Western Conference can be down the stretch, especially when you get into March and April of a regular season.
Yeah, I think to your point, Jack, there's just a lot of really good teams around the league, and there's really, really good players. And, I think when you look at the East, to your point, they really have gotten better. Toronto's been really good. Boston has been really good. Philly certainly's got a lot of talent. They're figuring things out with their team. Obviously, Simmons going down is a big loss for them. The Milwaukee Bucks are absolutely terrific. They got the best record in the league. The West it's really challenging because I think one of the things that's happened this year is I think that you've seen some teams in the West that have not been fully healthy. You know, obviously Zion Williamson missed a lot of time with New Orleans. They dealt with a rash of injuries. Lillard missed time for Portland. Nurkic, who's been there, who's a really good center for them, has been out with injury since last year. He may be able to get back. You know, he's a real big part of their team. And then obviously Paul George and Leonard going to the Clippers, and LeBron and Anthony Davis with the Lakers. You know, and Denver's a team that, you know, just really deep, really good with Jokic and Jamal Murray. So I think when you look at the West from the number one team in the league, you know, all the way down, it's really, really, really challenging. And I think you can even look at, you know, the Warriors would have probably been a different team, you know, had, you know, Steph Curry not broke his wrist or his hand and he was able to play. So I think in the West, there's been just a lot of unrest because a lot of teams have had to go through injury and deal with the absence of players. And obviously Brooklyn's had to do that with Durant and Kyrie being out as well.
Right, and Brooklyn's a team that I think if the season were to start again, they're in the 7th spot right now. Would be a fun pick because you might have KD playing there. Got another text here on the Titan MRI text line for you, Coach. Our friend Brian Marchman asks, "What do you miss most about the college game?" And he misses you in Gainesville. We all miss you in Gainesville, but what do you miss most about the college game?
You know, it's interesting, Jack. It's two totally different situations. You know, the one thing I've always said that I do miss is I do miss practice. You can't practice as much in the NBA. There's a ways of going about practicing with the number of games that you play. And these guys are so smart and so experienced that, you know, you may not be playing 5-on-5 and a lot of contact in practice, but there's still a lot of things you can get done out there in terms of running and competing and having them work on certain situations because they are so bright and smart. There's always something a little bit, you know, to me that's great about college is that when you have a player come in, you know, as a freshman, his first time going away, and then you see what he evolves into as a senior, not only as a player, but as a person and what the next step's going to be in their life. So there are definitely things you miss about college, you know, just because you did it for so long. But the biggest thing probably would be the practicing. You know, you miss being out there, being able to practice a lot of it, you know, because you have days in between games. We get some of those opportunities during the course of an NBA season, but not nearly the amount that you get.
Right. And there's a lot in the NBA. For what I've heard through you and through other people I've been lucky enough to speak with, is that in the NBA the practices when they do happen aren't as difficult or as intense. I think a prime example of this is I asked how Melo's knee was feeling or how his ankle was feeling, whatever it was at the time, and you said, you know, Jack, he's feeling fine, but we're not going to practice him. He doesn't want to practice, but you know, he's still helping us out. Whatever you need, whatever I need here and there to help me out, but we're not going to practice him, and we're still going to play him as regular minutes. Is that kind of a common occurrence with NBA stars who are nursing an injury just don't practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing, the one thing I'd say about Carmelo is Carmelo did love to practice. He would be out there, but I think the thing you have to take into consideration, you know, is I've been very fortunate, like Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul and Carmelo and Paul George and Kevin Durant. The one thing I would say about all those guys is they love the game. But you also have to be fair to them because when these guys are putting on the line for 32 to 36 minutes a night, and then they got to come back, and then you have a game the following night, you're pretty much playing every other day. And sometimes you could be playing, you know, 4 games in 6 nights. So I've been blessed that the best guys have really, really loved to play, and they like to practice, and they'll get out there. But what you got to do is when you're practicing them, your time has really got to be efficient. You want your time to be really, really efficient. Now, obviously, if a guy is injured, is not feeling well, is dealing with a nagging injury, there are decisions that are going to be made to rest that player and to sit him out of practice because it's just a smart decision to make medically because the season's so long and there's so many games and you want to give these guys every opportunity to perform at their best. And then there's that balance between you do need to get work done. You do need to practice. You do need to work as a team, you know, and you're constantly, I think, during the course of 82 games, working on that balancing act of where you're not doing too much or you're in a situation where you're not doing enough. And I think, for example, like even having Chris Paul here, at 34 years old, he practices every day. Like when he can get out there and practice, he practices. When Carmelo was healthy, he would practice. Same thing with Russell Westbrook. They'd practice. But if they're dealing with ailments or issues that are going to be prolonged or going to prevent them from being at their best, you've got to be wise and you got to be smart. And I think that's why you're seeing so much of this stuff going on and people talking about load management right now in the NBA, because the players are really smart and they're in tune with their bodies. And I would say this, people may say, oh, they're just going to use that as an excuse and not practice. That couldn't be the first thing from the truth. These guys are so competitive and they're so good that they want to be out there. They want to be out there doing that stuff. But there's sometimes you almost have to say, listen, this is a time where you need to rest. So for me, for my short period of time in the NBA, for the number of unbelievable players I had the chance to coach, I would say all those guys want to be out there practicing as much as they can.
That's obviously a great point. As in these great players love the game, and it's hard to not love something when you're Kevin Durant. You're that good at it, I'm sure, and it goes for Russell Westbrook and Paul George and James Harden as well. But another question here on the Pound Hurt Facebook Live line is our friend William asks, what is it like recruiting out of high school? Is it harder to recruit a kid out of high school or scout a kid for the draft?
I would say that you're probably, it's not an exact science either way. I would say the NBA has a lot more time and a lot more resources to get their picks right than college does. With the way the rules were set up and the amount of time you can really go watch guys play, it's really, really hard. I've always said this, it would take somebody 15 minutes to go into a gym and watch a guy play 5-on-5 and figure out whether or not the guy was talented enough to play in college. The challenge is, are you getting a player that's going to have a great work ethic, that's going to really be unselfish, to understand what's, about to be part of the team, the level of sacrifice that goes in, how's he going to handle adversity, how's he going to handle struggle, what kind of internal drive does he have to be the best he can be? There's a lot of scenarios that you just can't find the answers to,
right,
in college. And I think in the NBA, because of the amount of time that you have, you've got way more resources to make those kind of decisions than you do in college.
Right, and obviously the analytical movement has been a huge help for the NBA draft and NBA draft scouts, and there's just more out there to look at as a coach or as an executive in the NBA. There's a bigger pool of kind of not only talent, but of these guys have played more games more often. You mentioned load management a little bit earlier there. I want to kind of dive into that because I think that 2016 season, especially the series that you were in, because I think you had your team that year taking that Golden State team to 7 was a huge reason they kind of broke down in the finals and ended up losing to Cleveland. Do you think that 73-win team, because they were going at it every single night trying to get that record, do you think that kind of sparked the load management era because of these guys won 73 games and they were so worn down going in to the finals that they ended up losing?
I think that probably a series, no matter who you are as a team, takes a toll on you. And that was really an emotionally draining series, I think, for both teams. So if we were fortunate enough to get through that series, I'm sure that could have had some kind of impact on us playing in NBA finals. But I'm sure, as you go through the people don't understand the playoffs to get to a championship. It's a 2-month process. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about maybe even as long as the SEC conference play is. You're playing in January and February, early March. That's about how long the playoffs go. So there's definitely a toll that gets taken on those guys. I think some of the load management stuff, it's interesting. Like some players you hear go out and they speak publicly about that they're not going to load management. They want to play. And there's other guys that, have had to deal with, I don't know all of Kawhi Leonard's, issues that he's had to deal with, but they've been real. He obviously missed a season in San Antonio. There's things that he's had to deal with. But like I said, there's a lot of games these guys play, mm-hmm. and there's such a balancing act. And, you got to make sure that these guys are, at their best physically. But I just think it's the smart thing to do in terms of the load management. I know fans don't like seeing that because, somebody goes to an arena to go watch somebody play and they're not playing for whatever reason. That may be something that's disappointing, but I can tell you, going through 82 games with these guys, I don't think that probably after the first month or two that any of these guys feel 100%. They're the amount of contact and what these guys go through physically. And when you're close up on the sidelines, seeing the speed and the length and the athleticism and the physicality of the game. Listen, Paul George, dealt with 2 shoulder injuries that had to have surgery on at the end of the year, and he's still playing.
Right.
The one thing about all these guys, like I said earlier, is they're so competitive. They know what it's like to play through pain, but the smart ones understand, okay, this is some pain that I need to get under control and I need to figure out a way to rest. But I'd say the one thing, Jack, with these guys and the load management stuff, the way these guys take care of their bodies is absolutely remarkable. It is a 24-hour process for all of these guys, from how they sleep, what they eat, how they train, what they do with their routines and their workouts, how they get themselves mentally ready to play. It's not just like, hey, show up and get here. Russell Westbrook, for every single home game, showed up 3 hours and 15 minutes before every game. Every home game, he was in the building by for a 7 o'clock game, he'd be in there by 3:45 or so, 4 o'clock.
Wow.
And he's getting himself ready to play. And I don't think people understand that when you're playing 82 games, sometimes you see in college, a team comes out flat, they're not ready to play. Just imagine playing 3 times as many games. These guys have an unbelievable ability to get themselves ready to play.
Right.
And they know what goes into getting themselves ready to play, but their body plays a big part of that.
Right, and you talked a bit about the surface confidence thing and the underlying confidence of these stars, and I think that has a lot to do with it. I've been working my butt off for 82 games. That I'm not going to let this one little hump stop me now. Got another question for you on the Pound Hurt Facebook Live by Freddie, our friend Freddie. He says, Billy D, how was the court dedication and the past players and all the fan attendance giving you the love that you deserve? How cool was that?
That was an unbelievable night. I was just so grateful and humbled, by Scott Strickland, the athletic director there. And I've known Scott for a long time, his days at Mississippi State. He and I always had a great relationship. And then obviously the relationship Jeremy Foley and I shared for 19 years was really, really special. Mm-hmm. And I owe him so much for his support and what he did. But to see everybody come back and to be able to share that with so many different people, family, friends, and former players was just an incredible night and very, very moving and touching for me.
Right, it's again a shame that we didn't get to see this season come to fruition because, as we know, Florida probably would have been a tournament team, and there would have been a kind of a lucky thing if Florida made a run. I think it would have been the Billy Donovan court run. That's what I would have called it personally. But moving forward here, I want to talk a bit about the 2014 Final Four. That team was unbelievable. I think it was your best team. You went undefeated in SEC play. You had 3 losses all year, counting the Final Four, and 2 of them were to UConn, and one of them was to another Final Four team in Wisconsin. Going into that Final Four, I had no doubt that you were the best team and that you guys were the odds-on favorite. But UConn came out and played great. I don't want to focus on the Final Four in general, but that 2014 season, how magical was that run for you through SEC play?
Oh, that group was incredible. I think when the season started, I would say that we were in a process of trying to become a team. I didn't think that we were a team. And the work that those guys put in to become a team was really remarkable. We didn't have, and I thought I would have certainly looked at drafting some of those players. Mm-hmm. That group was special. We didn't have an NBA player get drafted on that team. That team went over 100 days without losing a game. It was a remarkable group. It was interesting, the UConn game when we lost to UConn at UConn. I think that our team after that game, night in and night out, played pretty consistently or close to its full capacity. Mm-hmm. I would say that game, I think, was in December. When we got to March and we were in the Final Four, UConn was a much, much better team than the one that we faced earlier on. And I think a lot of that had to do with Boatwright and Napier.
Yeah.
Those two guys really came together and certainly had a lot better chemistry then than they did probably a little bit earlier in the year.
Mm-hmm.
But what our team did, it was the first time I think anybody had gone 18 straight games undefeated in the league, and then went right through and won an SEC championship.
Mm-hmm.
And for that group to kind of get out of we had lost in the Elite Eight 3 years in a row. We couldn't quite get to the Final Four. And then for that group to get over the hump and get to the Final Four was really magical.
Right, and you've been up against so many great players at the college and the pro level. I remember one of those Elite Eight runs that came up short was the Nick Stauskas game where he just went crazy. And then you've had Klay Thompson and Steph Curry make 17 combined threes in a game. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I remember Boatwright and Napier just burying any momentum that could have been had in that game. So, I mean, you've been the victim of some really, really hot shooting on the other side when you've lost in big situations. But that team, I mean, it lives on not only in Gainesville, but in college basketball, because no other team has gone undefeated in a conference. No other team has ran through an SEC tournament and a bracket region all the way to the Final Four. So that team is very special to me personally because I was older. I was able to watch them. I was able to attend that Final Four. But on that team, you had Scottie Wilbekin who got his cup of tea in the NBA with the Washington Wizards, and obviously Dorian Finney-Smith, who was having by far his best career year with the Mavericks. Talk about Dorian Finney-Smith a little bit, because I got to talk to him before that Vanderbilt game and your court unveiling about that Mavericks season. And he's made such an improvement.
Yeah, Dodo, I'm really proud of. He has done an unbelievable job. He was kind of our sixth man on that team and did really a great job. It's interesting. He kind of went undrafted, and I think players that go undrafted, so much of it is about timing and situation. And Dodo found himself in a great spot. I think Larry Shyatt, who was an assistant with us for so long at Florida. He then was the assistant for Dallas. I think that was a great comfort level for Dodo, having some familiarity there. I had spoke to Rick Carlisle quite a bit about Dodo because of our relationship, and he really made a strong investment in him. And then you got to give Dodo credit. When he was given the opportunity, he stepped up and performed and did a really good job. And he's kind of become that guy for them that's been a glue guy and a guy that can guard multiple different positions with his size, but he's really improved and gotten better. And I couldn't be happier for him because he's a great team guy.
Right. And he is. And that's another thing I wanted to mention and dive into here is team guys seem to be when you're at your best as a coach. The 06-07 teams were so balanced. You had nobody scoring, or if you did have somebody scoring 20 plus on a night, it was a different player every time. That team from 06-07, those great title teams, were very balanced. Dorian Finney-Smith is a very balanced player. And this year, your team, you had nobody averaging in the 20 points. You had Schroeder and Gallinari averaged 19. Paul was around 17, and Adams was around 11 there. Talk about how balanced a team can be and how much easier it kind of makes it to get the ball moving and not play this hero ball and really, really play good NBA basketball.
Yeah, this is, we've got to do it a little bit differently. Russell Westbrook and Paul George, and I think all these elite players, I put Chris Paul in that category. Obviously he's great. Schroeder, all these guys. Well, any NBA player who's a good offensive player, the number one thing they need space and they need room. And I think on this year's team, because of the number of good quality players that we've had and have on our team, they've all done a remarkable job of sacrificing for one another. And what I mean by that is they probably all could do a little bit more. I mean, like Chris Paul's getting 17 points. There's no doubt in my mind he could get 25. Gallinari's getting his 19, but he could get 25.
Right.
But they've all taken a little bit less for the greater good of the team. And the one guy you didn't mention, Jack, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a second-year guy. I think our veteran guys, Schroeder, Chris Paul, Gallinari, Steven Adams, they really have helped him and allowed him to flourish in a great way from his rookie year to his second year. And they really have all meshed very well. And Shai deserves a lot of credit because he's really, really worked hard to put himself in that position to do what he's doing this year. So it's been like one of those teams where on any given night, we've got probably 3 or 4 guys that could get 25 points.
Yeah.
And they all understand if somebody's got the hot hand, they all understand that person, it's that person's night. And that's been great to work with these guys.
Right, and then you talk about taking a step back, and that's what every great title team does. I mean, we look at the at those Warriors teams and how balanced they were, where it's Durant carried them through the first 3 games, and then you had the Clay and then the Curry game, and I mean, it's just a whirlwind, and to win in the NBA is extremely difficult. Talk about a little bit. A lot of college coaches have a different grind coming from college because those are all extremely successful college coaches. Talk about how you were able to make that transition and have over a 60 win percentage right now as an NBA coach.
Well, I mean, the one thing that, was helpful to me is I inherited a really, really good team. Serge Ibaka, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Steven Adams, Deion Waiters was coming off the bench. I inherited a very, very good team.
Right.
So that had a lot to do with it. I think if you look at some of the situations, John Beilein is a great coach, but he walked into a situation where I don't think Cleveland had these aspirations of certainly making the playoffs. They were in a rebuilding mode. But the one thing, I think that I tried to do when I came in is, I think Russell Westbrook maybe was in his 6th or 7th year. Ibaka was in his 6th or 7th year. Durant, 7th or 8th year. I had Nick Collison, who was a real experienced guy, was in probably 10 or 11 years at that point in time. And you have to take into consideration, these guys as players have experienced everything that they can experience. A lot of times when a high school player comes to college, there is a level of they're just naive. They just have not experienced it. These guys have experienced everything. They've experienced huge offensive nights. They've experienced devastating losses. They understand that on any given night here in the NBA that they got to come ready to play. So they're just so much more worldly than a college kid or a high school kid coming out. Okay. My feeling was coming in was, the first game I think I coached in was against the San Antonio Spurs. And the Oklahoma City Thunder had a history with the Spurs in the playoffs. Russell Westbrook has played against Tony Parker 50 or 60 times minimum. Kevin Durant has gone against Kawhi Leonard 50 or 60 times. This is my first time going through this. So I really tried to use the players to gather a lot of information. My biggest challenge was I needed to get caught up on the league. So I tried to work really, really hard in terms of the amount of film. They knew all the little nuances. They knew all the tricks. They knew all the little details. I was not privy to those things.
Right.
So I think there's a balance between taking the player's experience and using that, and then through your own personal experiences of watching film and trying to get prepared, you try to mesh those two things together. And I've got to say that, coming in, there's always going to be, I don't want to say, skepticism or doubt, but when you're dealing with players that are in their mid-20s, late 20s, sometimes 30s, and you're coming into the NBA, there's always going to be a little bit of, okay, does this guy understand the NBA? Does he understand what's going on? And I think a lot of times there's a learning curve for any college coach. But the best thing you can do, from my opinion, was to come in with a great level of humility and respect of what these guys have been able to do for such a long period of time. And I was very, very fortunate, Jack, that those guys were really, really good to me in terms of trying to help me, as a coach, being a first-year guy.
Right. Coach, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today on the show. I really appreciate you coming on. We're going to have to do this again sometime. Maybe we'll make Billy D a recurring guest on the Pod Up Show. Coach, again, all the best. We hope to see you on the sidelines again soon. And tell my aunt and your lovely wife happy birthday today.
Jackie Spreads, I will do it. It was great catching up with you this morning.
Coach, love you. See ya.
Love you too, pal. Jack.
Good.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills.
Let's give them something to cheer for now.
Our Gridiron sponsors are Crime Prevention Security, small enough to serve you, large enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Peachland Dentistry, Gator Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte and surrounding areas. Area Rug Masters, your number one choice for rug cleaning, and Pound Hurt, preferred personal injury attorneys.
Our touchdown sponsors are Gator BTW, Campus USA Credit Union, Celebration Point Town Center, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, The Keys Grill and Piano Bar, UF Mover Guys,
The Digital Mortgage Guy,
Adams Ribs, Cloud9 Spa, Coldstone Creamery, Gator Dominoes,
Celebrate Primary Care, Center State Bank.
If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, potupwithshane.com, and click on the advertise button or call Freddie Wiebe at 352-284-3733.
Again, thank you for all the great businesses that support the show. Please remember, if you like what we are doing here, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
He's looking, still looking. He's going for the end zone. He's got a touchdown.